Welcome to the PowerCat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome in here to the PowerCat Questions Podcast. I am not Tim Fitzgerald. Bossman's feeling a little bit under the weather this week. I'm filling in. Ryan Gilbert, the newbies, Grant Snowden, Jake Stevens, football. It'll be our topic for the day. Obviously, you know the drill. Our VIPs on Wabash get to ask the questions. Anybody can listen. I thought we had a new sponsor for this show, guys, but I don't see anything on screen. So I will dodge that one, but be sure to subscribe to GoPowercat.com as well as this YouTube channel. Gentlemen, let's go ahead and jump right into it here. Maybe the most noteworthy move of the week so far in K-State sports. New strength coach. Do you know anything about the new strength coach? And are you expecting for the team a decline in strength performance, stay on par, or do you see an increase in performance happening? Of course, that's from KSU Royals Cat. Grant, I think I should really just throw this to you as somebody that's been in that locker room. You've been around Coach True, and then Ray Thomas, who's now filling in. And, you know, if you want to make – I mean, this one stings, guys. This one does sting. There's no getting around that. You know, Coach True is awesome, but if there's maybe a little bit of a silver lining, this was, you know, Grant, you could speak to this, but it looks like it was his right-hand man, spent a number of years with Coach True, and rather than bringing somebody in and having to restart that entire process in terms of strength and conditioning, you're kind of just going to pass the baton on here to Ray Thomas.
Yeah, Ray Thomas is going to do a phenomenal job stepping into this new role, and he really was, you know, kind of just right under the wing of Truman Carroll. He was kind of more like the sports science thing, watching the catapult numbers that all players were at practice, giving reports on that at the end of lifting sessions, things like that. But Ray Thomas brings incredible energy. You know, if there was a secondhand guy to Truman Carroll of who brought the most energy into that locker room and facility, it was Ray Thomas. So he's going to do a phenomenal job, and he works really well with Scott Troush, the sports nutritionist. And, you know, I'm not expecting to see, you know, players drop weight. I'm expecting to keep seeing, you know, guys putting on a lot of weight in the offseason, getting faster, getting stronger. So this is a really nice hire from Kansas State, but there's no going around it that Truman Carroll leaving for USC is a big loss for this football program.
Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And Grant, obviously you were inside this program and kind of had a better hand on Coach True, but just from an outside perspective, you could see through spring ball, he's probably the most common name that we talked about in press conferences. I mean, It felt like it was Coach True everywhere, all over the place, implementing this new kind of extra 3 weeks that they used into the speed and strength side of things. So there's no doubt that he's going to be missed, but I think a couple good things come from it. In one of them being, yeah, sure, he's leaving, but he's going to a big name program in USC. He's going to get paid more over there. That's good publicity for K-State. That's showing that we're building guys and building the right thing. And obviously the next step is to be able to retain that kind of thing. But it shows K-State is doing the right thing and moving in the right direction in terms of their player development. And I think Ray Thomas, like you guys have both said, I mean, he's the right-hand man. He's seen the way that Coach True has progressed this program. He's been right there for all of it. So I don't see there being a step down by any means. I obviously don't know Coach Ray, so hopefully he's able to advance it, but I don't see there being any regression. The worst, I think this thing stays on par.
I like what you bring up a good point with going to USC. It's not like he just took a job at some random, you know, lower to mid power conference school, right? And you can talk about Colin Klein going to A&M, even Will Howard, right, going to Ohio State. Of course, it stings to lose players, coaches, you name it, but it maybe makes you feel a little bit better about yourself that you know, they're taking some good steps forward in their careers and going to some, you know, big time notable programs. You know, Grant, I was curious, man, in your time in that locker room with Coach True, did it really change? Did it evolve much in terms of that strength and conditioning, or has it really just been kind of the same, you know, just based off of what you're hearing in, you know, press conferences and some of the buzz, you know, around, you know, 22, 23 mile an hour guys are running, and just looking at, you know, guys' strength. Is it always just kind of the same year in and year out, or is that part of the evolution process as a coach, as a strength coach? Do things change a lot in that regard?
Yeah, you know, from what I've heard from former teammates, even just around the locker room and guys I still talk to this day, it sounds like it's really ramped up. I mean, we had maybe 3 guys around 22 miles an hour during my time there. And I think we have a few guys around 23 now. So guys are getting a lot faster. So I'm not exactly sure what's changed, but they said workouts are a lot more ramped up, a lot, higher intensity. And I think that just comes from the drive that, we have higher expectations ever since my freshman year. We won the Big 12 championship. That's kind of the standard now. So I think these workouts, these, speed training drills are really getting ramped up. So, I don't think it's going to go down with Ray Thomas, but I think that was a large reason of Coach Drew right there.
Yeah, K-State had a good start to last season. Obviously, things didn't end the way that maybe some fans had wanted it to. Kleiman mentioned that maybe one of those reasons was he felt his team just ran out of gas, right? It's a physical game, and towards the end, I think his staff, including Coach Drew, they were cognizant of having to prepare your body for not just a 7 or 8 game season, right? But now 12, 13 if you're playing in that bowl game as well. So certainly interesting stuff to monitor moving forward. Obviously, that's a big loss for Kansas State. Ray Thomas has some big shoes to fill, but Grant, like you said, sounds like he's a perfect candidate to do that. Moving on here from Kat in Colo. Hoping this doesn't happen, but what if Avery has to miss 2 to 3 games mid-season? Please discuss the backups and predict who will be QB2. Guys, before we even dive into who it might be, Blake Barnett, Jacob Knuth are kind of the 2 front runners you would think. This matters a lot. And you go back to that Colorado game last year, all 3 of us, we were out there up in the press box sitting next to each other. Taquan Roberson goes in he throws 2-3 passes, let alone 2-3 games. But if Taquan doesn't go in there and make a couple throws, I'm not sure if Kansas State wins that game. So this is something that matters a lot. And obviously Avery Johnson is QB1. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. He's a heck of a player. And Avery's going to be the one that makes or breaks the season. Let's not kid ourselves here, but he's going to get dinged up. And there's a question about him. The next one here is about him maybe running the football a little bit more. If that does happen, he's going to miss a couple plays, a couple series here and there. Maybe not, even if it's not 2-3 games. Guys, this matters. This conversation, it means something.
Yeah, it absolutely means something. I think that this is an important thing that probably didn't even get talked about enough last year. You knew you kind of had that safety blanket in Taquan Roberson, just knowing he had experience at the Division I level. You didn't really have to stress about that. But this year, like you said, it's probably between Blake Barnett and Jacob Knuth, neither of which are really like true experienced Division I quarterback options. And so I think it's interesting that that's kind of where it's at. But I don't know. I like Blake Barnett a lot. I like Blake Barnett a lot out of high school. I think that kid is going to be special if given the opportunity. I think he's got like the Colorado's record for fastest 100 time. He ran like a 10.4 or 10.5 in his division. So you've got a speedster, but he's also really kind of a pro style quarterback. So, he can run and throw. But Jacob Knuth in practice, the little glamours and glimpses that we've got to see him, I thought that he looked ready. He looks the part. He's a bigger quarterback. He's got the frame and the size to be a Division I quarterback. So in terms of the battle, I don't know who will win it, but it is very important, like you said, Ryan, that somebody's able to come in for a series or 2 in a conference game and at least, lead a decent drive. Even if they're not throwing the ball over the yard, just lead a drive.
Grant?
Yeah, Jake brought up a lot of good points. And I think, it's going to be a tough decision for the coaching staff because obviously if you want to go from an experience standpoint, then Jacob Knuth's your guy. He's had a few years now under his belt of playing D1 ball. He's from the University of Minnesota, came here. So he's been in a couple of D1 programs now. So I'd imagine that's got to be your front runner. But Jake's right. Blake Barnett is fast. So I think if you want to go from a true dual threat quarterback, because you've already got Avery. So if you want to kind of keep the playbook the same, and obviously he's no Avery Johnson, but if you want to keep, kind of the same playbook or rolling that kind of deal, I think Blake Barnett's going to be your guy. They've honestly both looked really good in the few practices and the few glimpses we've seen of them both throwing the ball and interacting with the running back. So this is a big deal. And we can get into the next question here in a second with Avery Johnson kind of running the ball more and getting dinged up. But this is certainly something to keep an eye on and when the depth chart gets released here later in the fall.
And Chris Kleiman, there's coach speak every once in a while in a press conference where, he's maybe just saying the right thing or not wanting to give away too much information. But I think he means it when he said, was that last week or 2 weeks ago, that, there is no QB2 yet. That's still to be determined, and that's expected though with the shorter spring. Same thing goes with special teamers as well. There is no a clear-cut kicker, punter, quarterback 2. Those things are all to be determined, but that's expected, and he is, there's comfort with that. There's no problem with that, but I think he, truly means it when he doesn't even know himself who that QB2 is. And Will Howard, I think this is something that's maybe worth mentioning as well. Will Howard, I listened to Big Ben had him on his podcast. Pretty good listen. If you haven't, I would recommend it if you check it out as a Steelers fan. But Will Howard mentioned they thought they were, K-State was going to go with the direction of Avery Johnson, right, just for the future, and he could kind of sense that, right. And that is something to worth mentioning, right. If you are thinking in terms of the future, right, Blake Barnett's probably going to have a little bit more pull than Jacob Knuth. Whereas if you're looking at experience, right, if you're playing on the road in a tough environment, you want to go with that older seniority, maybe quote unquote leader in that quarterback room. So pros and cons, different viewpoints you can take there with that QB2 battle. And from El Camino Cat here, that QB2 might get his chance to play if Avery is on the ground a lot with his legs getting dinged up. Avery Johnson, over under 15 rushing yards per game. Last season, he averaged 46.5. Discuss. Gentlemen, I'll throw this to you guys.
I think that's an interesting line because I think this season the offense looks a little different. I think there's more weapons for Avery to get the ball to. So I almost want to take the under for that reason. But at the same time, there was a lot of talk about Avery being hurt throughout the back half of the season last year and trying to play through some of that stuff. So if those injuries don't occur, then maybe he is running the ball a little healthier. And who knows, maybe those weapons that he's trying to get the ball to open up running lanes more for him. So I'd probably take the under, but I could see a pretty easy argument for both sides, just knowing that Avery's fast. Obviously, he's going to run the ball. I'm not saying that he's not, but I just feel like there's more opportunity to spread the ball around this year and more guys that are going to need touches.
Yeah, I mean, you took the words right out of my mouth. I think there's a point of view from both sides here. We've got the weapons that normally K-State doesn't really have in the wide receiver room and tight end room. But at the same time, Avery Johnson's the heaviest he's ever been, and he's running as fast as he's ever ran. So, he's not just, a skinny freshman anymore. He's really put on a lot of weight, and he's running fast. So if you want to get that guy in the open field and allow him to make plays, then he's going to be able to do that for you. So I honestly think it kind of comes down to just who you're playing that game. If you got a team that has a good rush defense, obviously he's going to throw the ball around a little bit more and give it to his weapons. But, if they got a bad 7 up front, don't be surprised to see Avery Johnson really get out in the open field and run for, who knows, maybe in triple digits.
Avery last season was interesting just because I think we all kind of got the sense that maybe Avery was trying to be protected a little bit. And, Jake, you mentioned the latter half of last year, there were some injuries and stuff that maybe weren't as publicized, but you could tell Avery wasn't 100%. But even early on, when it felt like there was nothing wrong, it just felt like they were being cautious with Avery. And, going back to maybe that conversation earlier about keeping guys, healthy and keeping guys with fresh legs for not just the first half, but for an entire season, I get it. But in my belief, I think Avery's going to get cut loose. Go out and play. If you're thinking, well, I always mess up this saying. I'm sorry. If you have to think about what you're doing, you miss a beat, you miss a step, right? If you just go out and play and you're not thinking, right? Grant, I'm sure, and Jake, you guys have played sports in your life, right? Like if you're just playing freely and you feel like you're on scout team, if you feel like you're just practicing, right? And you want to go, and I know that switching gears to a real game here, but you want to go out and get hit, right? You don't love to get hit, but you want to absorb that contact and maybe show a defender who's boss, right? Avery Johnson, if he can get back to that, because of course we've seen that all throughout his football career at high school, right? Like he is a runner, and 46.5 yards a game is not a lot. And for him to have 50 last game, 50 yards per game last season, man, I think Dylan Edwards and the speed and the wideouts, right? If these wideouts are as advertised, I would go over. And, do you want some more depth, proven depth at the running back position? Yeah. But, the dude out of, it was South Alabama guys that they added, correct?
Yeah.
Adding some depth in there. We'll see how that goes. But, DJ Giddens was a bell cow. Dylan Edwards wasn't utilized as much as we thought last year. Wideouts underperformed again. So if Avery can get some better help around him, some consistent playmakers, that's going to open up the opportunity for him to run the football even more. And, 46 and a half yards a game, guys. If Avery, he can get that on 2 runs easily. Break loose on a passing play. All right, nothing's there. I'm going to scramble out here. 20 yards here, 25 yards there. He's got it. And so you do the math on an entire season. I kind of like the over here, guys. I don't know if you're much of betting men, but Fitz loves to shy away from these questions. I embrace these over-unders when we pick stuff. But guys, I like the over here, and I understand what you're saying. And of course, an injury and a minor injury, I think, would be more detrimental here than a major injury, because if he's hurt, he's out. But if he's just got a banged up knee, all right, you're going to hand the ball off just a little bit more.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting point too that in terms of what even just the backs looked like last year, Avery really realistically was like the 3rd rushing option pretty much all the time, because you had DJ and Dylan, and he knew that, well, DJ was probably even better than we thought he was going to be at the end of the day. And Dylan, the speed that he had. But this year, there's maybe a little bit more of a question mark around who the 3rd rushing option is, because you've got Dylan, who's the number 1 back, but Joe Jackson has some experience. Who knows what he ends up blossoming into, but Avery might be the number 2 runner this year on the team. They might view that a little bit differently. So I could see your side here too, Gills. I could see, if Avery's the number 2 guy and he's getting 5-6 carries a game, but also scrambling out on pass plays and gets 4 more rushes that way, he's going to get 50 yards easy. I mean, if he's carrying the ball 10 times a game, he's getting 50 yards. That's
right.
There's really not a doubt. So yeah, I think it's an interesting line for sure.
El Camino put it at 50. Guys, I wonder, before the bowl game, before Dylan Edwards did what he did and proved himself as a ball carrier, you think this line's like 45, right? I mean, because that, the weight that you take off of Avery's shoulders, guys, there's something to be said for that.
Yeah, absolutely there is.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, gentlemen, moving on. From Jim Jam Trash Slam, I'm not sure if I recognize this one. If you're new, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to GoPowercat. What are the strengths and weaknesses of our defense this year? And obviously you lose a couple of guys to the NFL. Marquise Siegel is gone to the 49ers. Jacob Parrish, cornerback, out to Tampa Bay. So you lose some NFL talent. There's going to be turnover every year, but we'll get into specific, position groups here in the last question, guys. But you lose some, but then that opens up the door for your Donovan McIntoshes of the world to, maybe step up into bigger roles.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, the strength overall is just the front 7. I mean, the experience you bring back in the front 7. The run defense, I think, should be great this year. I think that you've got a lot of really talented run stoppers, Austin Romaine being probably the best of the bunch. The highest graded PFF linebacker of the year last year. Like that's pretty incredible to return that. And then you can put Des Purnell next to him. Also a great sideline to sideline run stopper. And then, if it's Asa Newsome, if he's healthy, he's going to play. But there's plenty of other guys. I mean, the linebacker room is pretty deep. The defensive line returns a bunch of talent. And I guess probably my biggest weakness isn't even necessarily just the secondary. I think it's just the experience of the secondary. I think there's talent in the secondary, and I think that could show. But I think it's just the inexperience. So how quickly can these guys like the Donovan McIntosh, the Zayshawn Rich, that don't have necessarily the snap numbers, how quickly can they get up to speed? Because right out of the gate, you've got Iowa State. I mean, they're coming. Rocco Beck's an experienced quarterback. They're gonna be throwing the ball around the yard, knowing that this run defense should be really, really good. And so, how quickly can these guys throughout summer ball get ready and really try to simulate games? How good of a look can the offense give them to put them in a position to be ready come August 23rd?
Yeah, both you guys bring up really good points. I mean, you lose 3 guys to the draft and 2 of them come from the secondary. So I think if you want to come from what is our strength, it's like Jake said, our front 7, you've got Cheedy, you've got Uso, you've got Damian Alalio, you've got Stufflebean, guys like that who've played a lot of football in the past. And then you look at the linebacker room, and it's really as strong as it's ever been. Of course, you have the likes of, the Austin Romaines, the Des Purnells of the world, and you bring in guys like Gabe Powers, and we'll see what he's going to be. And Rex Van Wy, Austin Newsome, Ralph Ortiz. I mean, there are a lot of guys that we'd be really excited about in this front 7. And I don't necessarily think that our secondary is weak. I'm I'm curious to see how they kind of handle the adversity and kind of getting thrown into the fire a little bit. Because like Jake said, you get Iowa State right off the bat. You don't get one of the Dakota schools up there in your first game of the season. But really curious to see how they kind of handle the season, because obviously they're a little bit more inexperienced in this front seven. But I really don't think we're weak anywhere this year. But if I had to pick one strength, it's definitely the front seven.
There's something to be said for, playing SEMO, playing UT Martin week one. You kind of get to ease into things, and especially for a secondary when you're going up against Rocco Becht, who's been there in the Big 12 and has experience. And I know Iowa State certainly lost some talent at the wideout spot from this past season, but you're going up against not only a power conference school, but a team that really knows, I guess, a quarterback rather, that is going to know how to utilize those weapons. And that's a good coaching staff that's going to try to exploit that. So that's a good point that you guys are bringing up is, this is not going to be a game or a couple of games, even sometimes depending on the season, to ease into things. You're going to hit the ground running, and it's not going to stop. Kansas State, it's 3 games in a row. I guess it's 4 technically. You had that game, the first conference game before the bye, correct? And so, you've got to be prepared, and that's going to be something to monitor for a team, right? Chris Kleiman made that sort of decision to do a little less in spring, and you're playing in week 0, so fall camp's going to start in like July, it seems like, but you're not going to have as much practice time when you want to put more emphasis on strength and conditioning. And there's pros and cons to that. Not at all faulting Kleiman for maybe this decision that he made, but you're going to be probably a little less prepared than you might usually be for week 1, which is now week 0 against Iowa State.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, you got to think about what you have after that too. You've got that North Dakota game sitting there, which should be a pretty good tune-up game. Then you've got Army, and Army's different than everybody else. I mean, that's another just wrinkle in the whole thing, and it's another game that corners and safeties are going to have to do all sorts of different stuff that they've never done before. And I say all this with a grain of salt too, because I think there's a real chance that VJ Payne might be the best player on this defense this year. Like I'm not that worried about this secondary. I don't think that it's going to be a bad secondary by any means. I really think that there's talent back there. I think Gunnar Maldonado's a captain at a Big 12 school the year before. I mean, you've got experience and leadership there. Like, there's plenty of talent back there. It's all the pieces are there. It's just a matter of, is everything going to fit into itself like it can? And it's just a test of, by August 23rd, having not done as much football work in the spring, how much can they get in the summer to get ready? And that's really just kind of the only question. I think that's the only weakness that I see, and I don't know that it's a weakness even.
Anything else before we go to the last one? Go ahead, Grant.
I was just going to talk about like kind of what you're hitting on. Just really excited to see how the team kind of handles really just the adversity, because this is, from what I can remember of K-State preseason games in the past, Iowa State and Army on their schedule definitely takes the most preparation than any season I can think of before, because you play in week 0 against a rival, a team that's really had your number the last few years, and there's a lot of bad blood there. And I've talked to a few guys, they really want to win that football game. And then you get a team like Army who's going to run the triple option and won the American Conference last year and really took care of a good Tulane team who gave K-State a lot of trouble last season as well. So really curious to see just kind of how this preparation all comes together and how K-State's going to handle these first 3 games of the year. Yeah,
win or lose against Iowa State, week 1, right, the second game of the year, is just so fascinating. You're going to be coming off a win. You're very high on yourself, but win or lose, you lose, you're down in the dumps. But if you lose that game, you still got to travel halfway across the world back to the States and prepare for a game. And knowing that Army is in game number 3 ahead, boy, that makes it interesting. And guys, we long off season ahead of us still from Gale. I'm sure we'll break down Army more as the months go on. But I mean, stopping Army seems to me like it's all schematics and trusting assignments and knowing who's got who and sticking to this back or this guy. That'll be fascinating to follow. But yeah, that's just another wrinkle in the defense here for this 2025 season. From KSU Royals Cat guys, last question. Coming out of spring and entering summer, what position on the football team is most stacked with talent? Which position should we be most concerned about? I'll throw this to you guys, man. Go ahead. What you got?
Man, this is a tough one. There's a lot of talent in a lot of different places on this football team this year. But honestly, if I maybe had to pick one, it might be the offensive line after, the last couple of weeks in the transfer portal that we've had. You bring back a lot of experience, but, nothing's going to – and you have all these weapons, right, that are, speed guys can run the football, but nothing's going to matter unless, the O-line does their job. And I think Chris Kleiman and Taylor Bratt did a really nice job going into the portal and, getting guys that are going to play a lot of really good football for this offensive line. And not just good transfer portal guys from good schools that didn't play. These are guys that played a lot of football last year and can bring in experience to this K-State football team. So really excited to see how this offensive line does. But, I mean, there's a lot of skill everywhere. So kind of curious to see what you guys have to say too.
I would say –
Go ahead,
I'll say real quick with talent, I think highly of the linebacker room. But that's a group with such a very high floor. I'm not sure if they're maybe the most talented group, but, just in terms of the question, you're keeping that in mind, right? Like Austin Romaine, I think he's got some talent, and Des Purnell maybe isn't the most talented guy in the world, but they're just such hard workers, and they have gotten to this level. Des Purnell's from Topeka, he's from Kansas City area, correct? Like these guys had to work hard to get to where they are, and that's just a testament to their work ethic, and obviously they've got some talent there. And you mentioned it, Jake. Who's going to step in? Is it Asa Newsome? Austin Moore, I think, epitomizes this, though, of maybe not being the most talented. I know he's gone from last year, but that just sticks in my mind of that linebacker room. So it's I'm trying to think of this from just a talent perspective and not just a overall good or bad are you perspective.
Yeah, my pick was the linebackers as well, Gil. So I guess I'll pivot a little bit. I think this tight end room is loaded. I think that it's very similar to the linebackers in the way that you just described, Gills. It's guys that are hard workers that, you've got the Garrett Oakley, you've got Will Ancio, who a lot of people and some of the coaches are saying he was the most improved tight end in the room. You've got Will Swanson back. I mean, you've got Braden Lofton back too. And then you bring in the number one tight end in the country in Lincoln Cure. And I don't know what his role necessarily looks like this year. I don't know if he's a tight end. I don't know if they'll keep him light and let him play a little bit of wide out, whatever they do though. But this tight end room is very similar to the linebackers the way I see it, because it's just a bunch of guys that are pretty local. I mean, between Omaha and Western Kansas is really where they're all from. And they're just hard workers. They outwork everybody else. And they just put their head down and grind. And it showed last year with all the red zone touchdown catches. So we'll see. I think that group should take a lot of weight off of Avery Johnson's shoulders again this year, because they did last year too.
I'm not sure if there's a tight end room out there that you would take over this one if you're Chris Kleiman. And there might be one at Alabama or Georgia or Ohio State that might have some more talent, but just with the continuity with Avery Johnson and the local ties, the local connections that this room has, and with the depth, it'd be one thing if it was, Travis Tannehill and Ben Sinnott, right? And that was it. But you've got just such a deep, deep, deep room. And it reminds me of like the Cleveland Browns quarterback room, guys. Like they don't probably have a bona fide number one QB, but I'd take that quarterback room over most. If you go from top to bottom, they've got five guys who do have talent. But yeah, I mean, I do not feel bad for Luke Wells one bit, trying to come up with opportunities for really five guys that are worthy, deserving of getting on the field, whether that's based off of their experience at Kansas State or that's based off of talent and the youthfulness that a guy like Lincoln Cure does bring. And you mentioned it, the number one tight end in the country. A lot of those ranking systems from 24/7 Sports, a lot of that is based off of talent, right? What can you be in the future based off of your talent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm very interested to see what Lincoln looks like this year. I'm very interested to see what they do with him. But like you said, I mean, you can't feel bad for Luke Wells coming into the situation that he's coming into, because he's in a pretty darn good spot between experience.
Grant, how's K-State's kicking and punting? How's that all looking up? Have you been plugged in at all in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I still talk to a couple of guys like Leighton Simmering and Mason Olguin, who's a long snapper, but sounds like the room's come together. Sounds like Teak and Cobb's made a lot of improvement, and Simon McClanahan is really punting the ball really well right now. He's also a really strong kickoff guy. The place kicking's still the thing that's kind of up for grabs. They brought in some guy from Lubbock. I've forgotten his name.
Cub,
yes.
come on, man. He's my candidate just based off of his name alone.
Yeah.
I will say that. That's an awesome name. Cub Patton. It's brilliant, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think the place kicking job's going to come down between Cub and Simmering, if I had to say it right now. And Simmering's, I think he saw a couple of like PAT attempts against some lower level teams last season, but kind of curious to see how the special team room all comes together.
All right. Perfect timing for Jake's
departure.
Barnett to go out. I don't know what happened there. But anything else for you, Grant? I hope I did okay. Oh, Jake is right back here to say goodbye to us. We can get him in. You with us?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. I don't know what
good.
happened. I got kicked out.
We're just wrapping up anyway. Perfect timing. Hope I did okay.
All right.
Filling in for the boss man. Fitz, hope you're feeling better if you're watching this, man. But we'll be back next week with some more of your questions here from Wabash Station. As always, reminder, subscribe to GoPowercat, not just the YouTube channel, but over on GoPowercat.com as well. Get your first month for just $1. I know there's not a whole lot going on right now in the K-State world of sports, but it'll pick up soon as basketball recruiting still has a number of spots to fill. And, guys, we're already into, like, creeping up on the middle of May here. The football season truly is going to be here before you know it with that Week 0 game out in Ireland. But, Grant and Jake, appreciate you guys hopping on with me, and we'll talk to you guys real soon.
Absolutely. It was fun.
Yep.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.